side.
I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Council of Commissioners for November 18th, 2015 to order. Clerk, can we please have a roll call?
10 present, 2 absent.
Okay, and let the record show that Commissioners Fisher and Palmer are excused and in attendance of the Lady of the Rockies 30th annual fundraiser event. So with that, Commissioner Henderson, can you lead us in a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which shall greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, would open the microphone for anyone wishing to give public comment on an item on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who has public comment on anything that is on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Oh, please come up and state your name and your address, sir, and we'll go from there.
My name is Dave Jennings. I live at 4200 South Rocker Road. I've lived there for 18 years, and I'm here to object to the issuance of a kennel license for John McClurning, my neighbor, due to the fact the excessive barking. I mean, it's constant. For the last 5 years, everybody that lives down at the end of South Rocker Road has had to put up with this nonstop barking, hours and hours on end, day in, day out, wakes me up in the morning. I mean, I can hear these dogs barking in my house. It sounds like they're right in the front yard, and it's got to stop. It's just, it's excessive. It's unbelievable. And he is supposedly have made some improvements, and it hasn't helped. It's got to stop. I mean, it's been going on for, like I said, over 5 years, and it's just, everybody is just fed up with it. I don't know what can be done or what, but I oppose to this kennel license because I'm afraid it's just going to get worse.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you for letting me speak on this matter.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm John McClurning. I'm applying for the kennel license. I'd just like to go over a few brief points here. I've lived up there for 19 years, and I don't know what the problem is. I've had hunting dogs there the whole time. I don't know whether it's an anti-hunting deal or previous engagements or jealousy. I'm neighbored on 4 sides. There's 40 acres. The closest premises is 1,090 or 1,160 feet away. That's over 3 football fields is the closest residence. The other 3, my other 3 neighbors, and I can name them if you'd like, they have no objections to it. I sleep 50 yards from the kennels, and I got 2 kids there. The dogs are quiet all night. Like I say, I don't know what the problem is. It's 5 miles out of town. Everything I do is legal with them. I could have as many chickens, as many pigs, as many cows, as many horses, as many cats as I want. But I can only have 3 dogs. That's why I'm applying for the kennel license. Not because I'm doing it to make money, because I hunt mountain lions with them, and there's 4 dogs, 4 to 5 hunting dogs there, including a house dog. It's unzoned property. Everybody signed off on it. The zoning board did. Like you say, you drive past the gun club. I could discharge a firearm out there any time of day or night. And that's about all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, and for the public, or I guess for the meeting record, those comments were in regards to communication 15-507, number 4 on tonight's consent agenda, item B, and we'll ask Mr. Randall for a report on that prior to this group making action. So, seeing no further public comment, we'll move into the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting from November 4th, 2015. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move to approve the minutes that of the regular meeting that occurred on November 4th of 2015.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Seeing nothing on the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have no items to be added to the agenda tonight. My chief executive's report will be very brief tonight since I was at the Lady of the Rockies event earlier this evening as well. What I do have to report is that our performance budget is been posted online at our website, and the printed copies of the performance budget are likely to be distributed maybe next week, but with next week being a holiday, it's probably going to be the week of November 30th. So if you really want to see it prior to having it in your hands, it is posted on our website right now. Otherwise, we'll get it in your hands as soon as possible. And at the latest, that will likely be at the December 2nd regular meeting. So, and then also, again, this body passed final resolution on the Mental Health Local Advisory Committee at its last regular meeting, which has since opened up the call for applicants. One of those positions is to come from this governing body, a commissioner. And so my hopes are that I can get all of these positions and applications into me by next Friday for appointment on the December 2nd meeting. And so for the commissioner's sake and anybody else out there tonight, they're going to meet the 4th Wednesday of the month at 1:15 in the afternoon.
Monday, I'm sorry. I must have
Oh,
misspoke.
excuse me, 4th Monday of the month. Correct that. 4th Monday of the month at 1:15 p.m. at the Leggett Apartments on Broadway Street. So encourage you to take a look at that and apply. So that will conclude my chief executive report for this evening. As we move into sections 1 and 2, I will note that on section 2, public hearing communication number 15-498, that public hearing has been rescheduled for the 9th of December 9th. And so that will not be taking place tonight. So moving backwards to section 1, we have a bid opening communication number 15-499. County Attorney, do we have proof of publication?
Mr. Chairman, there was proof of publication. It does appear to be in order.
Okay, thank you. We have Jeffrey Miller, Fire Services Director, requesting council authorization to hold a bid opening regarding the 2016 1,500 gallon per minute pumper tender for the Big Butte Volunteer Fire Department. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, it appears that the invitation for bid for this apparatus received just one sealed bid. It is from Big Sky Fire Equipment, 207 West Jano, Janeaux Street in Lewistown, Montana, 59457.
Mr. Chief Executive, there is a bid bond from a licensed security company that does appear to be in order.
All right, thank you. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chief Executive, members of the council, the bid amount is $288,692. And then there's an additional documentation that was received today that's included, that was to be opened tonight as well. It was received by the clerk and recorder's office at 3:10 PM from the bidder.
One more time, it was Big Sky Fire Equipment, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chief Executive, members of the council. Big Sky Fire Equipment out of Lewistown, Montana. And I'll read the bid amount again was $288,692. This additional document is addressed to me, Jeff Miller, Director of Fire Services, Fire Safety Building, 120 South Idaho Street, Butte, Montana, regarding Big Butte VFD 1,500 gallon per minute pumper tender bid. Dear Jeff, I found that the pump Water CXS 1,500 in the specifications for the Big Butte Volunteer Fire Department will not pump 1,500 gallon per minute at your altitude, 5,500 feet. This pump is rated 1,500 gallon per minute at a maximum altitude of 3,600 feet. The pump would be derated to 1,000 gallons per minute. We would need to go to a midship water, a CSU, in order to meet the 1,500 gallon per minute. The CSU pump could be used up to 8,000 feet and not have any trouble meeting the 1,500 gallon per minute. The CSU pump would run another $5,000 and you would lose your pump and roll capability. I sure would hate to see you get a truck and not perform the way it should. Thank you, Joe Moline, Big Sky Fire Equipment.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Henderson?
Mr. Chief Executive, Jeff, this isn't just in your case, but here we go again. I'm just curious, why a fire truck? 288,000, and we don't have more bids than just one. Can maybe perhaps, and I hate to put it on you, Jeff, but maybe you could explain a little bit. Are we not getting out to the people with our bid process or what? Because I just would think that there would be more than one bid for, and this isn't just a fire truck, it's on several other things that we've been bidding on. And I just wondering if there's a problem here on the bid process.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Henderson, the only thing that I can tell you that I do know, I know that the folks from Pierce that have a model that competes with the type of truck that was specified here requested some information early on in the process. They didn't submit a bid. For what reason, I don't know. I also know that General Fire Apparatus, the salesman from there, Mike Flint, had been requested a bid packet, had been in contact with me a number of times. He texted me today and asked me if their bid package had arrived. They were concerned with the weather yesterday. They had sent it FedEx. He was in the state of Alaska delivering a fire apparatus. I called the clerk and recorder's office late this afternoon. It had not arrived. If you recall, they were the same manufacturer that sent in a bid for the career apparatus that didn't have the bid bond. So I'm not really sure. Mike's a really nice guy. I don't know if they just have some issues with their department that sends out the bids. So I think we're getting the bid information out there. There's really not there's not that many apparatus manufacturers left. I'm really not sure. I think we are getting the word out, those that are interested. So I'm really not sure what the issue is. I don't think it's that the information isn't getting out. We're just not getting the bids in, Commissioner Anderson.
Follow up. Okay, thank you, Jeff. I just was curious, you said there's not many anymore, so in this particular case, like fire apparatuses, so is there also kind of an exclusive for this area or something that they would, I mean, Lewistown is the only one that could bid on it then, right? For that particular model?
Jeff?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Henderson, actually, this is the first time in my recollection since in my tenure that Big Sky has actually bid in quite a few years. I don't think we've had them actually bid in a long time. So this is the first time.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I would move that we refer the singular bid opening, our bid, back to both the Public Works Department and the Fire Services Department to review the bid and all the particulars that are around that and come back to this body with a recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anything further on the question? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And I guess it's after the fact, but what did we budget for this apparatus, Chief?
Mr. Chief Executive, I believe the budget amount was $288,000.
Okay, good enough.
Thank you.
Okay, moving into, with the note that we've rescheduled section 2 to the 9th of December, we'll move into section 3 of the consent agenda A and B. Are there any amendments, segregations? Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd like to segregate item number 4 in section B, communications, and that's 15-507.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Purdue Dolan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd like to segregate number 13, 15-518.
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd like to segregate number 3, communication 15-506.
Okay. Okay, seeing nothing further, Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move to approve Section 3 consent agenda A 1 through 6 and B 1 through 16, with the exceptions of item 3, 15-506, item 4, 15-507, and item 13, 15-518.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. On the question, Commissioner Anderson?
Yes, I believe you said 508, it should be 518 on item 13.
15-518.
Okay,
Thanks, Bill.
please note. Nothing further. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We'll go in order of communications. So communication 15-506, Nondis Mason, Vice President, Columbia Gardens Carousel Project, requesting council authorization to display a carousel horse with a donation box in the courthouse rotunda. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. The reason that I segregated this is I believe Nandi's here. I don't have an issue with the carousel being displayed in the courthouse. The recommendation on this was to go to committee of the whole, and maybe we can get it ironed out today. The only question that I have with the donation box, I don't know if Matt, if you can enlighten us on any other projects that might have had that, or if it's best, and if you guys would be willing to just having a sign that says, if you're interested in donating, go here, rather than having a box. I don't know what the rules are as far as having a donation box in the courthouse public building. So
That is a good question. I'm going to defer to our legal counsel and senior elected official, County Attorney Joyce. Can you? I can say that we've never had a donation box in the courthouse in the 3 years I've been here. So that's all I can offer. So, Commissioner Morgan.
I would refer back to Nandi. Would that be appropriate to just have a
a sign that says if you're interested in donating, go here? Would you be opposed to that?
No, I would not.
Okay.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Chief Executive, and all of the commissioners for your support, your wholehearted support for the Carousel project. The suggestion I had submitted in letter to you was to find out the answer for this, if we could put it in the rotunda. And I would like to describe it for you too. It isn't one of our large carousel horses. It's a cutout image. It's painted nicely and it's on a pole and it stands, it would lean, it could stand up against a wall or in a corner also. So there wouldn't be any liability attached to that. And if it's all right to do that, we will accept it. But if it's not, then if we could just put the cutout horse with a sign, supporting our project and where they could go to make a donation, that would be acceptable also.
Commissioner Morgan?
I think that would be probably more appropriate, being that there won't be somebody watching the donation box all the time, so.
Well, the donation box is locked, and we would be responsible for collecting the money every Wednesday.
Sure.
But still, if that proves to be a problem, then we would just advertise.
Sure. And what was the time frame that you were looking at to have this in the rotunda?
Well, we want to get them out as soon as possible. So I would say this week.
Length of time are you looking at?
How long to leave it there?
Yeah.
A month.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I would like to make a motion that we approve communication 15-506 with the caveat that they just advertise for where donations can be placed rather than a donation box, and place this communication on file.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. On the question, Commissioner McDonough?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would concur with Commissioner Morgan, but maybe as a suggestion, if you had self-addressed envelopes that people could pick up and then mail a donation, since it is an important project to the community, I think that people would tuck some money in or write a check. If maybe we could compromise and have a display or just an envelope form where they could pick up an envelope that's already self-addressed to the organization and mail it. As a suggestion, I think it seems reasonable on our behalf.
We have the ability to do that.
Okay.
And we could put out the brochures, and some envelopes with it. And that's directed directly to the Carousel Gift Shop.
Very good.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind getting in touch with my office, I think we'll have our buildings manager, Pat Holland, work with you to set up a display that'll work to the best benefit
Okay,
of the
thank you
project.
very
So,
much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
May I make one suggestion?
You may.
I know for the last 3 years you've requested that the use of some of our real carousel horses for the display in the rotunda. And if you want to do that this year, please give us a week notice, because we have to make arrangements to have people move them. And that's a job that we do, but we have to have some notice on that.
Very good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nothing further on the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Communication 15-507, Ed Randall, Community Enrichment Animal Service Department, requesting council concurrence in the John McClernand Kennel License request. Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Ed, I just was wondering if you could clarify maybe a little bit on the license request, since we did have a couple of folks that had conflicting issues. So thank you.
Mr. Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Commissioner Shaw, Mr. McLaren applied for a Class 3 kennel license through the Animal Services Department on September 11th of this year. He meets all the requirements of the license. I'm going to go ahead and ask you guys to look at some pictures of his kennel. It's really a real nice setup. He's been signed off by everyone except for the license number issued, which we would need your approval to do that. We didn't want to jump the gun, so, we would get the license number and I could surely report it to you tomorrow. As the crow flies, he's 1,160 feet away from his neighbor. The last picture in this, we took a picture from his house showing the closest house from his kennels, and it's a distance. It's 3 football fields. We see no reason to delay this, and we would ask for council's support in approving the kennel license.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just another quick update. Mr. McLaren's gone so far as to get a camera system out there so that he can, with video, so that it goes right to his cell phone so he can look at his dogs, he can hear them if they're barking, he can take care of issues. He's purchased bark collars for each of them. He's done extra work that he didn't have to do, but he did it to be a good neighbor. And so I think that we need to support his application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. Are there any questions? Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Ed, on the application, it says office use only, but written consent of 75% of surrounding landowners. Yes or no? And then you explain the premises, the closest premise is 1,160 feet. What's the standard protocol that you guys would ask for 75% of the surrounding owners?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Commissioner Morgan, it's 100 feet.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you. And once again, just for the record, Ed, I mean, everything that this gentleman is asking for is within the law. There's been no exceptions made. It's just clearly stated that that's what we're doing, just for the record.
Mr. Randall?
Mr. Chief Executive, Chairwoman Shaw, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. One last question. I believe this would be Dave Palmer's district, if I'm not mistaken. Are you aware if he's been contacted by any constituents?
Mr. Randall?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Morgan, we've been contacted by no one except for the gentleman that did come up. It's the only complaint I believe that we've ever received. We've been out there several times. Again, Mr. McLaren has followed every rule. He's gone to great lengths and cost to care for these animals. I think as you look at the pictures, you'll see that it is a top-notch setup, or we wouldn't have approved it. And no, I'm very comfortable with what we've asked you to do.
Okay. Commissioner McDonough?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. So his current setup doesn't violate any law. Do I understand it correctly that this is just a good faith application, that he's not violating any ordinance or law by his current setup, but he's still applied for the license?
Mr. Randall?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner McDonough, he has more than 3 animals, so he applied for a kennel license, which is in our ordinance. He's followed all the rules and regulations, and so we'd like to approve the kennel license, the Class 3 kennel license.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions?
There's no,
I just
Commissioner Sorge?
Mr. Chief Executive, thank you. Ed, how long has he had more than the 3 animals, or why did he decide now to get the kennel license?
Mr. Randall?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Sorge, I'm not quite certain. I'm not involved in every call, but I imagine that he either contacted us or we went out there and informed him of the law, and so he abided by it. Either way, it works.
Okay. Very good. Hey, Commissioner Ralph, given that you're on the animal board?
I'll make the motion that we concur with Communication 15507 and place on file.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to concur and place on file. Is there anything further on the question? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Communication 15-518, Dave Palmer, Butte-Silver Boat Commissioner, District 12, requesting council's concurrence of the recommendations by the Economic Development Standing Committee regarding the Economic Development Mill Levy Funds. Commissioner Purdue Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I segregated this communication. I think the Economic Development Committee did a great job with the Economic Development Mill Levy funds this year. I sit on the Economic Development Committee, and we approved all of the requests for the most part, and I voted yay because we have to concur with all of them as a collective package. But I just wanted to go on the record tonight just to point out for one of them, for Evel Knievel Days, we concurred to give them over $4,000. And I just wanted to say that for the amount that we're giving for the taxpayer money, the new Park and Rec director has agreed that before the end of the calendar year, he will say and give the taxpayers the festival accounting for each of the festivals, but I also hope that we will get an accounting of what the Butte-Silver Boat taxpayers incurred for the in-kind services for that particular festival that was given, and the taxpayers put out for in-kind services for that particular festival. So I just wanted to mention that in addition to what the Economic Development Mill Levy gave for that that fund in 15-518. So that's what I wanted to say tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you care to follow that with a motion?
Sorry. Thank you. So with that, I would make a motion to concur and place on file.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the question. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I am on the carousel board. I believe when there's county funds or taxpayers' funds involved in a decision, I would recuse myself in this case.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Also, I have a conflict of interest as I'm involved with the Henri Rob Montana Irish Festival, so I will recuse myself from voting on this issue. But I do want to say that collectively we should have a report for all of the festivals instead of singling out a single festival for county in-kind services, because just as fair disclosure, the Montana Folk Festival and the Henri Raw Festival receive in-kind services as well. So I like to see the collective report that reflects all of the events and not just single out a single event tonight. So with that, I will recuse myself from this vote.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McDonough.
After you vote on this, I have a question.
Okay, so let the record show that Commissioner Shaw and Commissioners McDonough have recused themselves from the vote. Nothing further on the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. County Attorney Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Before you move on to the next item on the agenda, I just have a question about the recommendation in the Public Works Committee on Section 5, Communication Number 15502. It states the recommendation was just to place it on file, and I'm wondering if it should say approve and place on file, because it was a request to sign an agreement to purchase land.
What
Section 5 in the Public Works Committee report. Communication 15502.
Everybody getting this? Commissioner Henderson? You reading this?
Have to make a motion. Here, man, I'll just look in here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I would make a motion that we concur with communication 15-502 and place on file.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to concur with communication 15-502 and place on file. On the question, Commissioner Ralph?
I think we already approved the minutes, so we'll have to make a motion for reconsideration before we can make another motion.
Was this from the minutes?
This would be on the consent agenda.
Your motion.
Very good. So,
Chief
Commissioner
Executive,
Anderson?
I'd like to make a motion for reconsideration of the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to reconsider the consent agenda and a second. Nothing on the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So Commissioner Anderson?
Following that, I would like to make a motion that we hold for consideration communication 15-502, section 5 in the Public Works Committee report, and pass the other items in the consent agenda, being as they have all been approved.
Okay, Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Commissioner Anderson, I don't think that's warranted. I think we can pull out that one communication and re-vote on that one.
I would just hold that one for consideration then.
Okay, so the motion is to hold communication 15-502 for further consideration. Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Mr. Schultz, do you have anything on this? Was it meant to be concurred and placed on file? Or do you remember?
Mr. Schultz?
Oh, we could ask Commissioner Henderson too.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Morgan, this was on your agenda 2 weeks ago and was referred to Public Works, and it was our hope that this evening that it would be approved. So we would hope that you could have the recommendation be concur and place on file.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Henderson, anything to add to that? As Chair of the Public Works? Okay.
No, I went out and seen, excuse me, Mr. Chief Executive. I went out and reviewed that area because it was in my area, in my district, and there was no problem at all.
Okay. Duly noted. So what are we're looking for a Commissioner Ralph?
I would make a motion that we approve communication 15-502 and place on file.
Okay, we have a motion to concur with communication 15-502 and place on file. On the question, Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Let's confuse this even more, but after being consulted by our legal counsel, I need to make a motion that we concur. Oh, never mind. Hold on.
Mr. Chief Executive, go ahead and vote on that one, but then you need to make a separate motion to repass your consent agenda since you reconsidered it.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so motion and the second is to concur with 15-502 and place on file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Commissioner Morgan?
I can do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'll make a motion that we can approve the consent agenda. Do I need to resegregate the other ones?
No.
No, okay.
Want me to do
And,
it?
yeah, so there you go.
Second.
Hey, we have a motion to reconcur with the consent agenda and place on file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. That moves us into section 4, communications to be read and act on. 15-510. Dave Schultz, Public Works, requesting an opportunity to provide information to the council regarding the relocation of the county shop complex. Mr. Schultz.
I just meant. But I didn't.
Yeah, you see the point. I'm sure some of our. Quite right.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, we wanted to come before you tonight and just give a presentation regarding the process that we are using to find a new location for the county shops. Go ahead, Nick. The presentation will cover, and this will be brief, it won't be as long as this slide makes it out to be, but the presentation will cover why the shops must be moved, what's at our current shop location. It's rather important to understand all the various functions that are fulfilled for our community at our present shop complex. We'll identify the parrot removal area and why they must be removed. And that'll be Pat Cuneen from the NRD will discuss that. Nick Sanford will talk about locations that have been considered and rejected and those that are still under consideration. And then Andy Dare from Pioneer will talk about the schedule for selection, the selection criteria, the construction schedule, and he'll give us also an idea of the preliminary cost estimate for creating a new shop complex. And at the end, of course, if anybody has any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. So probably almost everyone in the council has been to our shop facility, and probably quite a few folks that are in the audience as well. But it's made up of a number of structures, and those are identified in this slide. It's located behind the Civic Center for anybody who is unaware of the location. And it consists, and I'll be brief, of the main office where we have our administrative offices for the road department. That's where Nick Sanford, Tom Loggins, the Parks Department, Jennifer Kearns all have their offices. And that's where the public comes when they have problems or difficulties with their roads. It includes a fairly large machine shop. It's the vehicle maintenance shop and equipment wash station is how it's labeled here. And that is where all of the maintenance occurs for the vehicles that we use to sustain our city. And that includes public works vehicles, but also police cars and fire trucks. We have a bus wash building so that our buses can be clean as they roll through the city. Then we have quite a bit of heated and cold storage. The heated storage is very vital. You've got to be sure plows will start and dump trucks will start and blades will start. So at 40 below, when we need to keep people traveling in our city, we can count on those vehicles starting. So go ahead, Nick. So I'll turn this over to Pat Cuneen with the NRD program, and he'll talk a little bit about the parrot tailings, what they are and why they have to be removed.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Chief Executive, members of the council, my name is Pat Cuneen. I'm an environmental science specialist with the Montana Department of Justice. I live at 25 North Lake. What you're looking at right here is 1903 U.S. Geological Survey map, and it shows, to orient you, the You can see Silverbow Creek there as it crosses under Harrison Avenue. And almost to the center of the picture, you can see the Parrot Smelter. And the waste from this smelter were left in place, basically covered by overburden from the Berkeley pit in the mid to late 1950s. And those wastes are still there, several million pounds of copper still in those wastes, and they will continue to leach that copper to the shallow alluvial aquifer unless they are removed. This is a photo of the Parrot Smelter at the turn of the 19th century. Actually a pretty large facility. Obviously none of us remember this. It was demolished in about 1906. On this photo, if you were sitting at the counter at Joe's Pasties looking north, this is what you would have seen 120 years ago. And look at the tailings to the left of the smelter. Those are the wastes that are still leaching to the groundwater. And you would, if you look at just how large this facility was, it employed 300 men in its heyday. And currently right now, we only have 350 people working in the mining industry in this town. This photo was taken just before the smelter was demolished. It actually stopped smelting ore in about 1900. The gentleman in the foreground on the right side of the photo is actually collecting a sample of those tailings for a lawsuit that was lodged by Mr. Magone, a rancher in the Deer Lodge Valley who sued all the mining companies in Butte for the release of tailings into the creek, which eventually washed out his pastures and prevented him from feeding his cattle. A gentleman by the name of Con Kelly defended this case for Amalgamated, and of course he later became a legend and the president of the Anaconda Company. This is an aerial photo from 1955. You can see the Civic Center to the left of the photo. Silverbow Creek runs under Harrison Avenue right there, and back to the right and up to the north is the creek. You can see Texas Avenue on the right side of the photo. And you remember the old Texas Avenue overpass, and it goes on to the north to Shields Avenue. But this is the Parrot tailings prior to them being capped. The purple outline in this drawing shows basically what we plan on excavating when we remove the tailings. The area to the top left of the photo kind of looks like a finger. We actually couldn't get a drill through that area. That is the slag pile. You can see the kind of the black outline of that pile. And farther to the right, right underneath the Texas Avenue overpass, there's another slag pile there. But our plan is to remove all those tailings so that they will no longer be in contact with groundwater, and they will continue leaching. So they will not continue leaching to that aquifer. The yellow dots represent places where we have drilled and have collected soil and water data from those locations. And you can see right in the center of the photo is approximately right where the city county shops are right now. The well that's just outside the center field fence behind the Civic Center, when you pump that well, the water comes out brilliant blue like Gatorade. And if you look at that, the first row, it's the drinking water standard. Water has to be of a certain quality before it can be consumed by humans. And if you look at cadmium, CD, the drinking water standard is 5. The Berkeley pit water is 1,800. And this water has over 4,000 parts per billion. So very highly toxic. And if you look at the copper in this water, the drinking water standard is 1,300 parts per billion. Berkeley pit, which we all think of as the most highly contaminated water on the face of the earth, pales in comparison to the copper in this water. It's over 14 times the amount of copper in this water than there is in the Berkeley pit water. And also, the decision to remove the tailings wasn't based purely on toxicity, but also on mobility. In 2006, when the EPA made their decision to leave these wastes in place, it was felt that at that time, this aquifer, this body of water, was only moving at basically 2.5 feet to the east of Harrison, it would only move 2.5 feet per day towards Silverbow Creek. And from Harrison Avenue west, they believe this body of water was only moving at 15 feet per day. However, in 2010, they did a aquifer or a pumping test on the well behind the locomotive at the Civic Center, and they found basically that water is actually moving much faster above Harrison Avenue. It's depending on which criteria you use to evaluate the aquifer, it moves between 120 and 640 feet per day. And below or west of Harrison Avenue, it moves from close to 500 to 1,000 feet per day. So when they made the decision to leave this waste in place, they felt it would take approximately 144 years for a drop of water from the Parrot tailings to make it to Silverbow Creek. However, after doing this pumping test, looking at the new data, that water can move from the Parrot tailings area to Silverbow Creek in as little as 2.5 years. And that's the reason we at the state believe these tailings have to be removed. Not only do they pose a threat to the aquifer, but eventually they will pose a threat to the health of Silverbow Creek, which the state has just completed that cleanup at over the cost of $130 million.
All right, I'm Nick Sanford with the Butte-Silver Road Department, and here's the current location, as Dave described before, of our county shops. The total area that we have now is about 13 acres roughly, and we prefer that size or something larger to accommodate all of our activities that go on at the shops. And this shows the parrot removal area in coordination with our shops as of right now. It extends, most of the removal is where our shops currently sit, and it extends up to the north where that baseball field is, and kind of where that big hump is. That's where the dam was holding the tailings back. So there's a few locations that we have considered. And then these locations coming up, there's 2 locations that we have considered but already rejected, coming up in the analysis that Andy will talk about here in a few slides. But this first location that was rejected offhand was Montana Resources. It is their property right now. It's just north of their offices off of Shields Avenue. It's close to our current existing location. But the reason it's off the table now is they're not willing to sell, and they have other uses for it in their operations upcoming in the next 20 years or so, I think is what they told us. So the next location that was rejected is the Kelly Mine Yard. It's a smaller location, 8.9 acres. It's a poor fit for what our uses are going to be. It's currently used by other uses as well, and it could be slated for another uses as well, so that's off the table. These next locations are still under consideration. The first location, what we're calling Centennial Avenue Property A, is currently owned by Centennial Concrete. We're actually going to take a tour of it tomorrow morning and see what it has to offer to, I guess, kind of update the analysis. But it's off of Centennial Avenue, north of the Metro Sewer Plant. The animal shelter is just right in that same area as well. So it's a good central location for our operations, but we have to go take a look at it and get some more information on it tomorrow. The next property is what we're calling Centennial Avenue Property B. It's just to the west of that Property A. It's currently owned by another property owner. We're still not sure whether they're willing to sell. Is that correct, Dave? We haven't heard back from that property owner yet. It's in the pretty much the same location, just off Centennial Avenue. It's got access to the north off of Excel and to the east and west from Centennial Avenue. The next location is north of Civic Center Road, which would just be north of our current existing shops. So what would happen in this location would be, the tailings would be removed next year on that north section. The shops will be built the following year. And then once the shops get built and we move to the north location, where the existing shops are would be removed the following year after that. So it would take an additional year to remove the tailings. And that location is a good central location, but it could be slated for other commercial uses. So the next location is the Montana Pole Plant. It's a large location. It has a large area. It's currently under evaluation from MDEQ to get rehabbed. It has, as of right now, one access point, which is Greenwood Avenue. If this location came into play, it would be nice to have another access up north through the underpass of the interstate, which would be kind of an ordeal in itself. We'd have to deal with the interstate, the Federal Highway Administration. There's a railroad and there's a creek, Silver Bow Creek that runs through there. And then Metro Sewer Plant is also through there. There has been some pushback from the existing neighborhood in that area, the Boulevard and then Williamsburg in that area. So that's also considerations that Andy will talk about here in the upcoming slides. The next location is, we're calling the BNSF Upper Yards. It is just south of the MAC. It is less than a mile from where our current location is. It's a good central location. It's got access from the west and access from the east on Iron Street. We'd have to deal with the railroads with that. And as some of you know, it's not easy to deal with the railroads in dealing with their property. So that's one hurdle that would have to be overcome in this property. So and that's included in our evaluation. The next is the Mike Mansfield Technology Center. It is south of town, where MSE currently has their location right now. It is a large location, as you can see, 56.3 acres site. It's got some existing buildings that could be used. They would have to be retooled. It probably would cost some additional funds to retool those buildings and to retrofit to our current needs right now. It is about 7 miles south of town, south of the courthouse actually. So it is a ways away from where we currently are. It's not a central location, but it is a big area that could be used as our shop location. So. And then I'll turn it over to Andy and he can talk about the schedule and the criteria of what's going to be analyzed and go from there.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening. My name is Andy Dare. I'm an engineer with Pioneer Technical Services. We've been working with the Public Works Department for the feasibility study and to choose, hopefully identify locations for the potential relocation of the shop. So I'm going to share with you where we are in the process currently. I'll run through the site selection criteria, and then I'll share an original cost estimate that we put together for, excuse me, one-to-one replacement costs of the current facility. So as you can see, the first bullet, that's actually last Friday. We have a draft study out for review currently, and will no doubt be shared at some point in the near future. The next date you can see is the end of the year. So as the schedule runs currently, we're looking for a council approval to move forward with a single location. And we would be looking at construction in 2016. And that's driven by the proposed removal schedule that you're obviously aware of. Pioneer and also SMA Architects have some additional tasks that we'll run through next year. Those include a site-specific cost evaluation or cost estimate, and then also a conceptual site layout, which will be used in the final design. So I'll run through the criteria that we chose, that were used in the study. We collected data for each site, and in addition to standard site selection criteria, we worked with Public Works to identify criteria that were important to them. And from there, we create a matrix for comparison of all the criteria, and we score them without weighting, and they're scored 1 through 3, with a low score being a preferred location. So first up, you see planning criteria. We obviously look at zoning and residential adjacent land use. Whether it's residential. We're looking for neighborhood acceptance. We're looking for a good fit with zoning and also with the growth policy. And then we have site characteristics. We look at topography. Ideally, we're looking at a flat location, but anything less than a 5% grade would also be ideal. We look at drainage, number of drainage sheds on the property. 1 would be preferred, obviously. And then we analyze the soils and the subsurface conditions, and that's to anticipate any grading or excavation problems that may be encountered during construction. And then we look at vegetation. Is there native vegetation on the property? Because that would be a positive for a buffer and would also add character to the chosen site. And then we look at structures. Are there existing structures on site? If so, are they able to be reused, or do they present a demolition liability? And then we look at environmental characteristics. We look to see if there are any wetlands constraints on the property. We look to see if the property is impacted by the current floodplain. And then is the property currently under the Superfund program, because that could potentially have an impact in the future with the site usage. And then as a standard, we look through infrastructure. First, we look at utilities. We want to make sure that the available capacity is on site or in the immediate proximity for power, water, sanitary sewer, communications, natural gas. And then we look at infrastructure from a transportation standpoint. So we look at existing roads. Ideally, there are 2 or more existing roads for site access and egress. And hopefully we're close to a major arterial and in close proximity to the highway. And then we have site access. We're looking for no encumbrances to access the site itself. That's important to mobilize vehicles at will as needed. And then we look at mass transit just to see the availability and the proximity to any bus routes, for example. And then we have proximity to the existing facility. Obviously, a central location is preferred, and we're looking to avoid any inefficiencies for operations for Public Works. And then we have program fit. We're looking for the structures that we have currently to fit in the chosen site. And is there any flexibility there? Is there additional acreage so that we can potentially bring in satellite offices of Public Works to that location? And there's the potential that the hot plant could be relocated at this site in the future. And then we look at rough order of magnitude costs for site development. So those would include roadway costs, earthwork costs, and also any off-site costs that could include the potential for street widening and also any stormwater management that would need to be considered in developing a site. So here we have a preliminary estimate of probable replacement costs for the facility that Mr. Schultz showed you earlier. There are 7 buildings currently at that location, 5 of which are pre-engineered steel structures. And we also have included some limited site work costs with this estimate. And those include just basic utilities and any existing infrastructure that the Public Works currently have at that location. And those include the magnesium chloride storage tanks and also the in-ground fueling system that they have in place. And what they do not include are any land costs and costs associated with a specific building site. Also included are 15% contingency, and that's standard for this type of analysis. And then we also have a 15% contingency included that covers professional fees, and those would be for the engineer, the surveyor, architect, as well as any geotechnical or construction observation and attorney expenses that may come up. And with that, I'll hand over to Dave. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the council, I should have mentioned that the funding source for this relocation of the shops would be the NRD program. So at this point in time, there's no BSB dollars included in this process. Andy alluded to the idea of moving satellite offices to a central location. And we would prefer to do that. It may not be possible. But right now, as probably a lot of you know, we've got sewer crews reporting to the Kelly. We've got water crews reporting to the shop on Galena Street. We've got, well, there's several other spots and they're escaping me at the moment. But we're rather fractured as far as where our personnel are now located. So having everyone report to a central location would be a much more efficient way to manage the operation. So we would hope to make the new administrative offices somewhat bigger than they are now so that my office and all these other offices could consolidate in one location. So that concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Canine, Mr. Sanford, and Mr. Dare. Commissioner Henderson.
Mr. Chief Executive, I'd like to ask Dave a couple questions. Dave, on this, are you talking about bringing in the hot plant into this location too, also?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Henderson, it will depend on the location. Nick went through the series of locations that are still under consideration. Some of those maybe could accommodate a hot plant and some could not. So we would like to have the hot plant at this new location if the neighborhood and the topography and the size would allow it.
Well, follow up, Mr. Chief Executive. There was a few things I was looking at 17 acres and 19 acres, and that doesn't seem to be anywhere near what you're going to need when you put it all together. And I was just wondering why, you know, the consideration, you know, like say we were talking around the Mac Center there, the below there, the railroad area and stuff. And, you know, at 19 acres, I think it was, we're looking at kind of a serious problem there because you surely couldn't put the hot plant up there. I know from experience from have the winter garden over there, the bowling alley, that the hot plant has a lot of smoke and everything else coming out, you know, and I'm not talking about that it doesn't have the right emissions and stuff, but I mean, there's a lot of noise and everything else. And I can't imagine that being in areas, for instance, like that. So when we were talking about, the gentleman was talking about out at MSC, that proposal, the 56 acres out of the way, everything else, that could be a general location for everything, couldn't it? I mean, Kelly, the whole works, the hot plant, everything, couldn't it?
Mr. Schultz? Chairman, Commissioner Henderson, it could be. That's a fairly large piece of land that should be able to fit everything. I don't delude myself that even in that location, I think we'll end up with some neighborhood opposition to a hot plant. Anybody who lives to the west might fear that odors or dust or something from the hot plant might drift their way. So I don't think there's any spot we'll pick that there won't be some opposition to, but you're correct in that MSC property is large enough.
Commissioner Sorge.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I guess this question is either for Pat or Dave, whoever. Pat?
Yes, John.
In the event that Parrot tailings is, accepted to be removed, best case scenario, when are they going to start?
We had the governor come to Butte in August, and he had an aha moment when he saw that blue water. And I said, when do you want to get this out? And he said, let's move some dirt next year. So our hope is probably middle of summer to be moving some dirt.
I guess then my next question would be, or follow up, please. My next question would be, how are you going to coordinate moving the dirt out of there that still have shops in the way and not have any place shops to go while you're still removing?
Well, that's the tough hustle, John. Absolutely. I would just like to acknowledge right now that the Public Works Department and Mr. Dare from Pioneer have been fully cooperative of what we're doing. And I think we're running a good objective process here. But you're right. If we want to start moving dirt, we would typically, we would get that material on the north side of Civic Center Road first, leave the county shops there. Hopefully a site is selected by you all at the end of this year. And once that property is selected, then the purchase is made and we start immediately building the new shop complex. How long would that construction take? Probably a year. There's probably some shops or some facilities that would have to remain there while the new shops are being built. Could it all be done in 2016? That's very aggressive. But we do think we can start the removal action and stage that accordingly as the county progresses towards a newer shop location.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I don't know if this is an appropriate question for Dave or for Mr. Canine, but I've been asked this question since this has been in the newspaper quite a bit, is the Civic Center. And I couldn't help but notice on the map today that has a map of boreholes that have been tested and tried and all of that. And I noticed that there wasn't any around the Civic Center. Is that safe to say that there's no tailings under there? Or is it safe to say that we just don't want to know if there's tailings underneath the Civic Center? So just a question. It's been posed to me several times.
Mr. Canine.
Good question, Mr. Morgan. Not having that visual to look at right now, but in the North Civic Center parking lot, there were 2 boreholes placed in the parking lot there. We found about 2 inches of tailings underneath the parking lot. And if you remember going back to the first USGS map, it showed a dam. And the tailings were kept behind that dam. So at periods of high flow, I'm sure you had material come over the spillway of that dam and on down. But when they added the annex to the Civic Center in the 1990s, I believe, the Bureau of Mines went down and inspected the excavation, and they actually logged that there were about 4 inches of tailings in that area. Are we going to get all the tailings? No. We won't. In the area between the elevated tracks and Shields Avenue, if you recall those photos from 1955, lots of tailings in there, all the way under Shields Avenue up to the railroad tracks to the north and east of that. So our belief is that if we can't excavate it, you got to cap it. So the material that we don't excavate, we plan on capping. Right now, that 2 inches that's under the north parking lot, it's not worth going after, and it is capped. So,
Commissioner Henderson.
Mr. Chief Executive, I don't know, I'm not sure who will answer this, but at the pole plant, is that been signed off as far as, because I thought there was still a lot of hazardous material there, and also that bad vegetation and quite a bit of other things. Is the pole plant clean right now or not?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Henderson, it is not, the cleanup there is not complete at present. It should be complete within the next 8 months, 12 months, 16 months. The date tends to vary. That is one negative of that location. Another one is that a substantial piece of that ground is within a 100-year floodplain, which would make it difficult for us to build over there as well. Those are constraints on the pole plant. You know, there are definitely some problems. Nick described the problem with access. Having Greenwood Avenue as the only access makes it difficult. our ability to get a roadway to the north to connect with Centennial is problematic as well. So there's a number of factors that make the pole plant difficult, but it sure isn't out of consideration at this point.
Commissioner Purdue-Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Pat, have you figured out where you're going to put the parrot tailings when you remove them?
That is still under negotiation. I would tell you that our greatest concern is for public safety. We would love to do this removal action without putting large trucks on the road, on city streets. If you think about moving the volume of tailings and the overburden material, we're looking at roughly overburden is, and the material is, we're probably looking at 20 Finland hotels to move. And that's going to require about 40,000 dump truck loads. And I really am reluctant to see 40,000 trucks going up North Main Street to the mine waste repository. So we are looking at alternative disposal sites. And those sites will have to be, we have to do our due diligence on where those go. But at this time, we don't have a deal on that yet, but we will before we start removal. Absolutely.
Okay. Seeing no further question, Commissioner Sorge. Sorry.
Thank you. One more. Mr. Schultz, I guess this question would be, wherever you go, I guess I probably know the answer, wherever it's going to be moved, the buildings are just going to be demolished? Or are they any salvage any of these buildings, or are they just all going to go away?
Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Sorge, we will salvage what we can from the buildings. There's lots of tools and lifts and things like that possibly that we can move. The buildings themselves will likely be demolished. We've done some analysis that indicates that the cost to relocate a metal building is fairly close to the cost of a new metal building. And so with that in mind, it just kind of makes sense to build new. So likely those structures will be demolished.
Okay.
Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. We're talking about moving the dirt as soon as possible, according to the governor's place, and we're talking about some of these locations, the pole plant taking another year to clean up, and the consolidation of the hot plant and other buildings, the water and sewer and other things. As you mentioned, are we doing any other work besides site location? Do we have any architects working on possible designs and everything for this yet to just kind of get a better idea of what site would look best if we were to incorporate a bigger office building that would have all of the tenants that you'd like under one roof with it, just to make it easier for the flow of traffic and everything for y'all? Is that something that's been under consideration now?
Mr. Schultz.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Anderson. No, sir. We haven't done that depth of analysis yet. It's our intent to scrub out the sites that aren't suitable, end up with probably about 3 viable sites after this analysis that Andy submitted to us on Friday that has yet to be reviewed. And then on those 3 sites, we'll get into the level of detail that you just described.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. My question, Dave, is a procedural one. At the vote at the end of the year, are we going to be presented just one location that's been flushed out for an up or down vote, or are we going to, is it envisioned that we would have a couple of options on the table?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner McDonough, I guess that will be up to the Chief Executive and you folks exactly how you want that structured. My thinking has been that we'll probably have at least one more or a couple more meetings like this where we will go over the findings of these various sites, and that in the end we'll recommend a location for you folks for an up or down vote.
Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you. I just was thinking that 2 or 3 of the potential sites are listed as being owned by other parties, particularly on Centennial, up on Shields, and MSE. So sometime between now and the end of the year, we'd have to know if they're even a viable proposal, whether they, are you in the process of, presenting an option to them to sell the land?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Shaw, I have been in communication with all of the landowners, And we have willing sellers in all but one case, and we just haven't heard back from that individual. That was the Centennial B piece that kind of looks like an arrowhead going off to the west. It's owned by Gilman Construction, and we just, I've made several inquiries and haven't heard back, which probably is our answer, that they perhaps aren't interested in selling. The Centennial A piece that is owned by Centennial Concrete, I've met with Mr. Saluso and his son, Mark, and they are willing sellers, and they're willing to sell at the appraised value. The MSE folks are willing sellers, and so I think the other locations, they're all viable from the standpoint of getting ownership, but probably not that Gilman piece, the Centennial B.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
And so, like you said before, Butte-Silver Bow is not into this for any funding. And so depending on what we, the properties obviously have different values, and can I assume then that the NRD will be covering whatever that choice is?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Shaw, that is our intent.
Okay, thank you.
Except for whatever the betterment cost is. We expect the NRD to replace in kind what we're giving up. And then if we need to make it a bit larger to accommodate these additional crews and offices, then that betterment cost would be something that Butte-Silver Bow would pay for. But in the overall project, that should be a fairly small number.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. For what it's worth, I mean, you come here looking for input, and one thing that I think you should consider is location. MSEs is way out of town. I mean, I'm just voicing my concern with that. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
I'm full of suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Dave, if you do over on the pole plant area, would there be any thought of maybe incorporating the animal control into that? I know that'd be a betterment cost. It's like you say, everything's fragmented, but it sure seems to be make sense to have expansion of animal control in that area also.
Good ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
For your time and effort.
Moving on, communication 15-514, Ronald Stormer, Human Resources Director, informing council of the status of union negotiations to date.
Excuse me, we need to do something with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive.
Excuse me, just
Sorry, Ron.
hold tight for one moment, Mr. Stormer. We are going to note and place 15-510 on file. So Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Beth. I would move to place or to concur or just to place on file communication 15-510.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to place 510 on file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I would start before Mr. Stormer goes with his presentation here that, as you know, his last day with Butte-Silver Bow is going to be this Friday. He's accepted a very exciting opportunity for him to be the labor relations manager in Kitsap County, and so we'll wish you well in that regard, Mr. Stormer. But I'd just like to state on the public record that I thank you for your service, and as I think we're about to hear and see, Mr. Stormer has accomplished quite a bit in the time that he's been with us. So thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive and members of council. My name is Ron Stormer. I am the HR director for at least 2 more days. And my communication initially was to just give you an update on where we were at with the union negotiations. And subsequent to submitting that communication, I was asked by my staff and several other people if we could indulge you for a few extra minutes and talk a little bit about some of the accomplishments that we've achieved in the HR department and some of the challenges that we still face, not the least of which is finishing out the union negotiations. So with your indulgence, I'd like to just give a quick summary. One of the things that we undertook initially was to update a lot of our personnel policies and procedures and a lot of the HR forms that we use in the HR office. And I have to tell you, a lot of those personnel policies hadn't been looked at since the mid-'80s, early 90s. So they were pretty out of date, and some of them still are. So that's a project that's not completed.
Also was the implementation started by the interim HR director before me, Penny McElroy, of a really systematic recruitment and selection process for hiring new employees. And it's a great process, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to do with it. Using that process, we've filled over 250 positions in the 22 months that I've been here. About 100 of those positions have been permanent employees. We've conducted a countywide supervisor training program for all supervisory level employees, something that hasn't been done in a very long time, to try to give our supervisors the tools they need to do their job. In addition, as you know, we've contracted with the state of Montana to allow our employees access and benefits through the state clinic that they have here in Butte. And a real positive result of that is that there's been actually no net cost to our insurance plan, but there has been significant savings for our employees. So in a way, we gave our employees a little bit of a raise there. We undertook a major project to reorganize the structure of the filing system in the HR office. As you know, we inherited a pretty dysfunctional department in many ways. This has not only allowed us to function more efficiently as an office, but and more importantly, to be in compliance with state and federal law. We've implemented a tracking system for all of our employees who are on Family Medical Leave Act leave. We've created electronic copies of all critical files and documents that didn't exist before we started that project. We've reduced the mod factor in our workers' comp claims a small amount. We're still way too high. And we've had significant reduction in our liability cost thanks to the work of our safety and risk manager. We've built capacity through the internal training of our new HR specialist, Jessica Stevens, to enable us to conduct our own salary and compensation studies, something that we would normally farm out, and we have farmed out in the past at great expense. We'll be able to do that in-house now. And I think most importantly, we've improved the culture of the HR department to make it a more professional, more welcoming, and more trusting environment for our employees to interact with. And I'm very proud of that piece, but I owe a lot of the kudos on that to my staff, because I think they've done an amazing job. So moving on to challenges, of course, which are challenges are always opportunities. First and foremost is, and this is near and dear to my heart as the Personnel Committee knows, is to continue to develop and fine tune the proposed market-based pay plan, which we believe will now allow us to recruit and retain the best employees for our workforce. We've put really 4.5 solid months of work into that. There's a little bit of fine tuning to do. There's a few questions that I think the Personnel Committee has asked, and they're really valid questions. I think once we get past those hurdles, I think we're going to be well on our way to having a pay plan that we can all be proud of. And quite frankly, we need something so that we can really function and know what we need to pay our employees. We need to continue the process that we've started to update our policies and to update all employee job descriptions. Our job descriptions are extremely ancient, and they don't, in many ways, don't reflect the jobs that our employees are doing. We're in the process of finalizing a significant reclassification of the pay grade system in our clerical bargaining unit, which I think will make pay for our clerical workers a lot more fair and a lot more reflective of the work that they do. We need to continue to work on bringing down the high cost of our workers' compensation claims. And I think one of the items on the agenda today was the hiring of the second safety person, which will go a long way to do that. We also need to really look at developing a succession plan for some of our key departments that are facing significant retirements in the near future. This is something I don't think that's been a lot of thought given to, but it's right around the corner, and I think we need to make an effort to start planning for that. We need to maximize our internal capacity by using all of the human resource modules that are available to us. Currently, we don't use or own all of them. This will make us much more efficient as an office, but will also enable us to move away from an outside vendor that we're using for our recruitment process, which will not only save us time, but it'll save taxpayer money.
And then finally, we need to settle the remaining labor agreements that are still in negotiation. I wanted to talk a lot about that today because that's in many ways, that's why I was hired, because of my background. We've got we have one contract signed. We have 2 additional contracts that we have tentative agreements with. So those will get signed shortly. We have a number of other contracts, some key contracts that we're very close. I think there's a few minor details to work out, and I think we'll have tentative agreements there. There are a few others that we're still in bargaining with at various stages of disagreement, and but I think we'll get there. I don't anticipate big problems with those, and some of those are some of our major bargaining units as well. And we have a couple that we're a mile away from. We have 2 bargaining units that came in with proposals that just border on the absurd. I'll tell you a little bit about what our offer was and some of the background behind that proposal that we took to the table. But knowing that that proposal was on the table, they came back to us. One of them was a 37% increase for one bargaining unit, in addition to other improvements for those workers. And the other was one that we almost fell off our chair when we read it. It was a proposal that would cost us, for 38 full-time and another 30-some part-time workers, just shy of $2 million over 2 years. So we're so far apart on that contract, I don't know how you ever close that gap. So, I've been in the labor relations field now for over 37 years. Tried to figure out how many contracts I've negotiated. It's somewhere north of 700. I've seen everything. I've seen good faith bargaining, bad faith bargaining, incompetent bargaining. And what I'm seeing here in a couple of these is what I consider irresponsible bargaining. They're not intending to get a contract, not sure what their exit strategy is, if any. And I'm really not sure where my successor is going to go with this. One of the plans that we have as part of our transition plan is to continue bargaining with our management team in place, as though, we didn't miss a beat with me leaving. But this is a big challenge. So I want to talk a little bit about what we took to the table. We took a proposal of 1.5% in the first year and 1.5% in the second year. It's probably the smallest increase that most of our employees have ever seen in their tenure working for Butte-Silver. But those numbers were arrived at by looking at where we were at currently, the current economic situation in the area, the current economic situation in the state, copper prices at historical lows, a lot of unknowns in the future. So it's money on the table. It's not much money, but it's significant in that we're moving forward in a really tenuous times. The initial offer just included those percent wage increases. We did not include money toward the health insurance, and that's something our employees have become accustomed to because we've done it every year, I think, going back to 1996. So we had a couple months of really tough bargaining, and there was a lot of pushback by the unions, and the focus at that point was not just the small wage increase, but that we weren't giving money toward the health insurance. So we went back and looked at what we could possibly do to rectify that. And we came back with a proposal, which we felt was extremely generous, given our situation. We proposed a $25 a month increase per month in the first year of the agreement, which covered the increases that we had in our premium under our Butte-Silver health plan, and then a $30 increase in the second year, which we hope would cover any increase for next year. We offered that in 2 ways that I think were important. One was either as a lump sum payment to the employee or as a premium increase where they wouldn't be taxed on, where they would be in a lump sum payment, a premium increase, but that premium increase would sunset at the expiration of the contract. And the rationale behind that was we didn't want to build that into ongoing permanent cost, not knowing where we were going to be in 2 years. We really felt that this was going to be enough to get the deal done, and it did in some cases. We did get some of our units that accepted that and are going to take it back to their membership and vote it. But we also had some units that are so far away from reality that I think they essentially laughed at that proposal. And we haven't been back to the table with them since. So that it's a significant challenge for the management team. I don't envy my successor stepping into this at this particular stage of the game. But we do have a transition plan that my position is posted, has been posted for several days. I think there were 8 applicants when I looked today. And as I said, we're going to continue the bargaining without any kind of break and try to get these things hammered out. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity. It's been a wonderful 22 months. You guys have been all great to work with. And I also want to thank my team, Cinda Size, Jessica Stevens, and Shelley Kissel. So I think Jessica's here somewhere. She left. Okay. It's too boring.
She was crying as she left, actually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Any questions for Mr. Stormer? Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you very much. A couple questions for you, Ron. First off, thank you very much. You did a fabulous job in your tenure here, and I appreciate it. The one union you mentioned, was that 37% or 3.7?
It was 37%.
3.7, no points in there.
That was just on wages. There were other items in there as well.
Exactly. And a couple follow-ups, if you'll indulge me. The 2 million on the one bargaining agreement, when I looked at that and just did the math, that's 16.5K per person. I think that's a little bit extreme. But as far as the other one where you added that caveat of putting some of the money towards the health insurance cost to cover the premiums, when we look at the Care Here that you mentioned, bringing in that clinic and everything, and the amount of money that's been saving the employees, I know that I myself has used it. I know a few others have also. Has that been a factor in the negotiations, how much money that medical care has been saving the employees and everything? Because it seems to me that would be a substantial savings to the employees of the county.
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Anderson, we've not been able to get a solid number from Care Here in terms of even a gross amount that saved our employees, let alone the ability to break it down by bargaining unit. If we could do that, it would be great. I would love to go to the table with a particular bargaining unit and say, we've saved this bargaining unit $10,000, and that's $50 per person. But we haven't been able to do that. But there has been a savings.
Follow up.
And just to follow up with that, is there any way to do any kind? I understand all the HIPAA regulations and everything goes along with the healthcare, but is there any way to kind of put into place some kind of mechanism to try to track that a little bit? Or is that something that they'd have to do, or is that something the future HR could?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Anderson, Care Here can do it. It's just because of the way that the enrollment process is through Allegiance back to Care Here, there's no way to track it by bargaining unit. We can track it by individual employee, and then we're bumping into the HIPAA regulations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Purdue-Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Thank you so much, Ron, for all of your service to Butte-Silver Bow. How many union contracts are still outstanding that still need to be signed for Butte-Silver Bow?
We have 2 settled and signed. One of those was actually an agreement that was negotiated back in March. It was a new bargaining unit in our health department, so that's been done for a while. And then one that we just recently signed, we have two more tentative agreements, so that's essentially 4 finished out of 17.
Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. It goes without saying, Ron, that you filled a huge hole, and now we're getting that hole back, and I'm not happy about that, but I wish you the best.
Thank
and
you.
I am on the Board of Health, and I know I can speak for Karen Sullivan as well in the audience here, that our director, that you did a wonderful job for the health department, and you will be missed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Ron.
Sure.
Just to kind of shed a little more light on the transition process. I think we're getting close and we're making some good progress on some of those remaining contracts, and are prepared to stay the course. One of the benefits, I mean, obviously, this is a big position to fill, but one of the benefits of having a negotiation team that sits in these bargainings, we hope to continue to make progress on bringing some of these to closure. But in the short term, just for folks' information, the staff that Ron leaves behind with the folks that he already mentioned are going to take care of the day-to-day things and the paperwork that comes and goes with our employees. And we have his position out for advertisement right now. It's currently scheduled to close on the 30th of this month, and so I will be putting together a selection committee to move forward, and hopefully we'll be able to ring in the new year with whoever Mr. Stormer's replacement is going to be. So at this point, again, I would just thank Ron publicly for his service and wish him luck in his endeavors in the Seattle area. So thanks, Ron. Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move to place communication 15-514 on file.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to place on file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Section 5, ordinances and resolutions referred to the judiciary. Please take note of those. Section 6, ordinances and resolution for final reading. Number 1, clerk, can you please read the title?
Council Bill number 15-16, ordinance number 15-16, an ordinance repealing Title 13, Chapter 4, entitled Wastewater Treatment System of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code, and replacing it with a new Title 13, Chapter 4, to still be entitled Wastewater Treatment System of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code, and providing for an effective date herein.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw.
I move to place Council Bill number 15-16, ordinance number 15-16 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call, so please cast your votes. All votes in. Clerk, can you please record?
10 yea, 0 nay.
Okay, ordinance passes. Number 2.
Council Bill number 15-17, ordinance number 15-17, an ordinance amending Chapter 16 entitled Air Quality Control, specifically amending sections 8.16.030, 8.16.220, 8.16.300, and providing for an effective date herein.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw.
I move to place Council Bill number 15-17, ordinance number 15-17 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. All votes in. Clerk, can you please record?
10 yea, 0 nay.
Okay, motion passes. At this point, is there any public comment on items that were not on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move into taking note of the calendar of other meetings and events. And I would point out that the local emergency planning meeting that is listed on there has been changed to same room, same time, but the date has been changed to the 9th of December. Are there any other? Commissioner Shaw?
Thank you. Just a reminder that our committee of the whole is next Tuesday.
That is correct.
Same time, same place.
All right. Seeing nothing further, we have a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Meeting adjourned.